Okay. Good morning, Gary. Okay. Kumlen and Ablan Gemara. Today we're up to Daf Kuf Yud Ches Amid Aleph. We learned in the Mishnah where there were two co-wives. We learned that two co-wives came and reported back. One of the co-wives, let's say Leah and Rachel, they were married to Reuven. Leah said that he died, and Rachel said that my husband died, and Rachel said the husband didn't die. Now, we said in the previous Mishnah we learned yesterday that the co-wives cannot testify about each other because we cannot trust, and they don't have an ulterior motive. They want to harm the other person, causing them to get married when they shouldn't have it, and messing up their lives. So not let them get married when they could, they should remain in Aguna. So here you have two women saying different stories. What do we do in this case? Since we don't trust either one regarding the other person, we'll trust them only regarding themselves. So one of them says that the husband died. We say, get married, get your ksubah. The other one says that, we said you cannot get married, and nor can you get your ksubah. That was case number one. And in the Mishnah, there's no argument on that, as it appears. Then you have case number two. One of them, they both say that the husband died. One of them said died a natural death, and one of them said died, was murdered. Here, we have an argument of Meir and Rabbi Yehuda B'Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda B'Shimon says, well, they both agree, that they are both, they cannot testify by each other, but they're both agreeing basically that died, so surely it's all good. Rameir says that because they're contradicting each other, as if to say, sounds like Rameir saying that they could testify by each other, and because they're contradicting, one said the husband did die, one said the husband did not die. One said died natural death, and one said it was killed, therefore they're contradicting each other. Neither of them can get married. And that was case number two. Case number three was one single aide says the husband died, and one of them said the husband did not die, or one of the co-wives said that the husband did die, one of them did not die. Bezin hasn't yet made a ruling, and this already occurred. Then obviously we don't know who to believe. They cannot get married. Says the Gemara. On case number one, the reason why we say to the woman number two, co-wife number two, you cannot get married because you say that your husband didn't die, so the other person's testimony has no bearing on you. Therefore, you cannot get married. Sounds like her ishtika, but she said nothing. She was just silent. Then Tinasa, she would be able to get married because she didn't contradict the first wife. But we learned in the Mishnah yesterday that one co-wife cannot testify on behalf of the other co-wife. So even if she would have been silent, why can't she? She has to remain unmarried because we don't know what happened. Just because the other wife said something that doesn't have any bearing. Or one side cannot testify on behalf of the other one. Says no. Really, the chiddush here is meis itzich. Really, one wife has no being on the other. The chiddush is that even though she got up and said the husband, for example, did not die, like meis itzich, we need her. The chiddush is in the case where she contradicts the first one, where she says nothing, and you're totally wrong on the first testimony. No, one side cannot testify on behalf of the other. But over here, because she's arguing, suddenly it tells us there's a fight going on over here. And it sounds like that the second person really knows that the first person is right, the husband did die. And she just, to spite the co-wife, she's saying the husband did not die. Even though she's harming herself, she doesn't mind because Thomas Nafshi and Plishtim, we both die, okay, as long as she's harmed as well. So we would have thought, the fact that she's arguing is that she's just trying, she's being critical for no reason, and therefore let's also permit her to get married because we don't believe what she's saying. Savgami would have thought, it's like reverse psychology. Really the husband died. The fact that she's arguing, we would therefore conclude that really the husband did die. Why does she say the husband did not die? Her only intention is, her only goal is to harm the co-wife. She's hurting herself as well, but Thomas Nafsha. So what if I die? As long as she gets hurt as well. Thomas Nafshi and Plishtim. No. We say that they have no bearing on each other, and therefore the second person, doesn't matter what the first person said, she said the husband did not die, she remains unmarried, she remains on if one of them says, in case number two, one of them says died natural death, one of them says it died through and was murdered. So since that man argues over here and says that they do have their testimony does bear on each other, and therefore they're contradicting, and then neither get married. So he should also say the same thing in the first case, where one said he did die, one said he didn't die. Going to Rameir, neither of them should get married. You're right. You're right. Rameir argues in both cases. But Rabbi Yehuda Reb Shimon here, and who the author of the first case in the Mishnah was Rabbi Yehuda Reb Shimon. But the Rameir argues in the same case, it surely argues in the first case. However, Rabbi Yechon says an interesting thing. I believe no. Case number one, everyone agrees. It's only case number two they argue. And why is that? I feel in case number one, I feel Rameir. Even Rameir agrees. The whole loy meis be'edus isha lava kashi. that if she says that the husband, what do you call it? If the second wife says that no, the husband did not die, so the second tzara has no aegis, we have no belief of what she said regarding the first person because no credibility because we said they might hate each other. But when it comes to case number two, they're not arguing. They both say that we're free to get married. But they're arguing how it happened. The moment that they're arguing how it happened, so we see they're no longer fighting with each other, but they're arguing how they contradict each other. What actually happened? Did he die a natural death or was he killed? That in itself tells us that neither of them probably really knows what happened. It's just an assumption that he made he's probably dead, and therefore we cannot believe either one of them. That's our Meir's version. So in order to we learned the last case in the Mishnah. One says he died, one says he didn't die, or Isha Medes Mace. One of the co-wives says he did die. Isha Medes Mace. One of the co-wives that didn't die had age. Was like as long as Bezin did not make a ruling yet, they're not getting married. In other words, we do entertain the testimony of one against the other. According to Rabbi Lazar's version, who holds that you believe one co-wife against the other co-wife? Rameir, according to him, because Rabbi Lazar said that Meir argues in case number one as well. He believed one co-wife about the other, and that's why in case number one, if one says he died, one says he didn't die, neither didn't get married. Same thing. In case number three, it's Rameir. According to Rabbi, everyone agrees. Where one says he did die and one says he didn't die, then that one co-wife cannot testify on behalf of the other co-wife, and therefore the one who says he died is able to get married. Who's the author of the last case in the Mishnah? Nobody. Kasha remains a question. Next Mishnah. Isha, woman. Here we have now a case here where a woman, there's a certain established status quo, and then the woman comes back and tries to change it. So if whatever she's telling us conforms with the status quo, we believe her readily. If what she's trying to tell us now contradicts the status quo, is an issue here. Which means we are going to be mach, but maybe she's saying the truth, maybe she's not. We're not sure. What's the case? For example, a number of cases. A woman and her husband traveled overseas, and when they traveled overseas, and then so she came back and she said, my husband died. She not say we just went before you get married, and she can take ksuba and vitzarasa asura. But since we have no other ages other than the wife, so she cannot testify on behalf of the tzara, so the tzara is forbidden, but she herself can get remarried, we believe it. Okay, well, this we learned before. How far do we take it? If she was, let's say, the tzara was a bas Yisrael, married to a kohen, we don't believe a word this woman said. As far as the other woman is concerned, this age has never happened. She's still a married woman, and she's married to a kohen. So it's as if it's not like we're not sure exactly. We're 100% convinced that as far as she's concerned, she's a married woman, and she can continue eating truma. Because the chazaka that the husband is still alive. The co-wife said the husband died. We don't believe at all the co-wife regarding the other wife, and even though since she cannot get remarried, nor is it, so therefore she can continue in truma. Rabbi Kiva says no. Ein zu derech meitziasai midday aveda. This does not take her out really, or takes her out from an aveda. In other words, not 100% sure that what the husband did not die. You know that for a fact. We don't know. We don't know whether she's telling the truth or lying. So that's Leah. Regarding Rachel, we'll say what we don't know. So as far as Rachel is concerned, she has to stay married. She cannot be married. But to go with that certainty, say that definitely the husband's still alive. That's how we don't go. She cannot get remarried. On the one hand, nor can she continue truma, because we don't know 100% what actually happened there. Okay, case number two, Amra, she says, Maze Bailey, she comes back. Remember, another one of the women that she doesn't get on with besides the Tzara is her mother-in-law. So she comes back, Leah comes back and says, Maze Bailey, my husband died, and my father-in-law also died, which means my mother-in-law is set free. But we know there's a certain acrimony between the two. Is Tinase, Leah, who's married to Reuben, can get married with Tivsavasa, but the Chamaisa, her mother-in-law, Asura, she cannot be married because we don't trust the daughter-in-law. That's what we learned before. However, what about eating truma? The mother-in-law was a bas Yisrael married to a kohen. She can continue eating truma during Taf. And again, as we segregate the two cases, as far as the mother-in-law is concerned, we have no idea that the husband died. When he left, he was alive, so we'll assume he's still alive. She can continue eating truma. But Kiva said, doesn't make sense. It doesn't help her at all taking her. She'll be doing an aveda if she eats truma when she's not allowed to. And even though the Chazaka says the status quo was that she's a married woman to a Kohen and she can continue reading, but the daughter-in-law threw a spanner in the works. You can't say dismiss it 100%. You can just say, we don't know now. Rabbi Kiva says, I believe that she cannot get remarried, but no, that she continue truma because we're in doubt. We don't know what actually happened. Says the Gemara, so why do you need both cases? Basically telling us the same thing between a co-wife and a co-wife if they don't like each other, dislike, and between a thing and a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law. So it's the same principle. Why do you have to argue twice? Says the Gemara, no, we do need to argue twice because it's not exactly the same. And why is that? Bearing in mind that we had one opinion yesterday that the mother-in-law, the reason why the mother-in-law daughter-in-law don't get on is why the daughter-in-law despises the mother-in-law. We know why the mother-in-law despises the daughter-in-law because she feels you're eating my Yerusha that I brought into the family, and you're not part of the family. Fine, but the daughter-in-law, why does she despise the mother-in-law? So we had one opinion that says Kemaim upon him, King because the mother-in-law hates her, she automatically hates her back. But the other opinion was because the mother-in-law constantly is pointing out to her son all the flaws and all the faults of his wife. She is a meddler, and therefore the wife doesn't like her. So it says in what as follows. The case over here about, let's say, the sister, the co-wives. Over here, Rav Tarfon says, look, we don't trust her at all from the side of the Gufa. There's competition there for the love of their husband and interest in the husband, and therefore she really feels the pain terribly, and she would really like to get rid of the second wife. In fact, that's what the motivation of Rabbi Gershom was to ban having two wives. Because it's very difficult to have shalom bayis. Aval chamoisa, but a mother-in-law. What's the problem with the mother-in-law? All of this is words that she constantly, it tells her son that your wife is no good here, your wife is no good here, which is not as bad as competing for his love. Maybe in this case, that I'm not so sure that you cannot trust her at all. It's not so bad. Maybe you could trust her. And therefore, maybe the mother should stop eating truma because maybe the husband did die. And it doesn't necessarily mean the daughter would lie in this case. It's not so bad. So therefore, we have to tell the Mishnah, that even in this case, the Tarfon says you can't trust the word the daughter-in-law says. And as far as the mother-in-law is concerned, she's still a married woman. And she can eat truma. Only the case of the mother-in-law, Rabbi Kiva said. But another case, maybe Rabbi Tarfon, could they really hate each other? Maybe it's made that you can't trust her at all. And then for the co-wife, not only she cannot get remarried, she can continue in truma. If we need both cases. So we learned this makes sense if you learn that the whole Gemara says the whole thing to do with words. But Yehuda's version of why the daughter-in-law hates the mother-in-law, even though Rabban disagree, they say it has to do with Kemaim upon him. But since nobody argued, he doesn't argue here, it means Rabban, even Rabbi Yehuda will concede that it works over here, and that's why this Mishnah goes even according to Rabbi Yehuda, because everybody agrees. Therefore, you need both cases. I'm going to be like a tarfon that you can eat truma. I'm going to buy Afanantim. We actually learned that way. It says we'll learn in the next mission. Neatly Bain, she said, look, when she left childless, but she said I had a son overseas, and Mezbani, but then my son died, and then my husband died. So therefore, I started out childless. I then had a child, but then I ended up being childless, and my child passed away. Then my father and my husband passed away. Then men, she believed. If she says, Bali, my husband died first. But when he died, I had a child, so I had no mitzvah yibum. But when she left town, she had no children. So she left town, the status quo was that she'll end up with a brother-in-law. Then she said, I had a son, no more brother-in-law. Then she says, my husband died, then my son died. Therefore, I have no mitzvah yibum. So she's changing the status quo. In the mention, I believed. But on the other hand, she's telling us a story that she cannot marry her brother-in-law. So therefore, we do take consideration of words. So therefore, on the one hand, she cannot marry anybody because we say she probably has a mitzvah yibum. On the other hand, she cannot marry her brother-in-law because she claims that she had a boy who outlived her husband. So therefore, what you do is just chalitza. So it says clearly, the woman who testified about herself, we trust her to be machmir, but let's say one tzara testifies on behalf of the other tzara, we don't take it into consideration at all. Not even chayshish. Chayshish means we don't know 100%, so maybe, so therefore we should take in consideration. Sounds like even then, only regarding herself, but medayik, but regarding a tzara, we don't even take it into consideration. So the mother-in-law, the co-wife, they can continue as if nothing happened. Next Mishnah, Kiddush, Achas, Mechamas, Noshim. Let's say he went ahead and there were 5 women standing next to each other, and he was Mekadosh, one of them, but any day the Kiddush, go try to imagine this particular story. He can't remember which of these women he was Mekadosh. Kol achas emeres oisi kiddush. They all want him, so each one says, "It was me." What do you do? So since he doesn't know which one it is, so no, you should get l'chol achas ba'achas. If it's up to him, if he wants, he can marry them all. But if he doesn't want to marry them, he has to give a get to every single person he doesn't want to marry. He get, because how do you know that wasn't the one that you gave kedusha to? What about a ksuba? You don't have to give 5 ksubas. That you don't have to do. You put 1 ksuba down and let them fight it out. Umistalik and walk away. They cannot all extract a ksuba from you because mammon and let them prove that they're the one that you married. Rabbi Akiva says, no. Again, similar to what before. You did something wrong, you're going to have to pay the penalty. This is not how we're going to stop people from misbehaving. What do you mean? You throw a kedusha to 5 women, or what was a hefker? You have to divorce each one and give each one a ksuba. You pay the penalty, you'll realize how you have to behave in a dignified way. Similar situation. Gozal echad. Now, the first case is talking about kiddush, very important. We're talking about kedushin. Sounds like he didn't get married to them, he just got them engaged. Next case, Gozal echad b'chamisha. He stole from somebody and there was 5 people there, but any day Mesa goes, I can't remember who he stole from. He just said the $100 he stole from me. So Rav Tarfon says again, you only stole $100. So you put the $100 down there, Mr. and walk away, let them fight it out. Give it up Tarfon. That's what Tarfon's view. Rabbi Akiva says, angel that the guy was stolen, you just let him walk away, so scot-free. He doesn't remember who he stole from. Okay, he doesn't remember who the victim is. It's his responsibility to reimburse the victim. Pay each one of them the $100, $500. Says the Gemara, Kiddush Ketani, Baal like Ketani. It says the Mishnah, even though he got Baal like Ketani. It says the Mishnah he got engaged. Doesn't say that he actually had Bia with them. It sounds like if he had Bia with them, which is a step further, and he doesn't remember which one it was Doc, whatever. Then even a Tarfon might concede that he misbehaved, so promiscuous, he has to give a get and a ksuba to each one of these women. Talking about a bia for kedusha, for marriage. Baal like Tani, and the same thing, Gazal Tani, but it does say Gzela. By Gzela, it says he stole, he did something wrong, and therefore there's an argument about Tafra Bakiva whether he has to pay 5 times enough. Abalaka like Tani, if he bought some merchandise from somebody, doesn't remember who, it seems that in our Mishnah, everybody agreed, you just put the money down and let the 5 possible vendors fight it out who actually sold you the goods. So we have, when it comes to Kiddushin, it sounds like it says in the Mishnah, Kiddush, he did nothing wrong. And we have an argument with Kibbutz Tarfon, whether you pay. It sounds like if he did something wrong, he did beer, without knowing what's going on, which is totally unethical, immoral, then you would have to pay the penalty. But when it comes to Gzela, the other way around, it sounds like the whole argument is because it did something wrong, they stole. But if he would have bought it, just doesn't remember who the vendor was, it was a market and there was a lot of people there, then that's when the argument is. But if you did something wrong, everyone would agree. So by Kedushin, it seems they only argue when you did not do something wrong. And by Gzela, they only argue when you did something wrong. So what's going on here? Which seems not to conform with any of the opinions, as we'll see in a minute, of the 2 Tanoim who argue about this very point. Says the Gemara, Mani Maslisin Hudu of Mishnah, Loy Tanakama, but later Shimon Lazar, not the Tanakama, not the Shimon Lazar. What are we talking about? The Tani we learned that Shimon Lazar, the Kula says, Loy Nechl Kud up Tarfon, but Rabbi Akiva, there's no argument between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva. If somebody got engaged with one of 5 women, the Eina Yedeya, this is what he got engaged to one of 5 women. He did nothing wrong, right? He just got engaged. Not so bad. But any days in Kiddush, just remember. So this Tana says there's no argument. Everyone would agree in that case he did nothing wrong. So therefore, you divorce all of them, but only pay a ksuba to one. When does Rabbi Akiva of Tarfon argue according to this Tana in the Mishnah? What do you call it? In the Braisa, al shabal. If you went ahead and you had beer, which is immoral, you can't remember who you had beer with, then we have an argument. Tarfon says, well, you don't know who he was. Put the ksuba down and just walk away. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, this kind of behavior is not acceptable. You have to pay each one a ksuba. Fair enough. That's case number 1. So in other words, they're only arguing when you did something wrong. The same thing when it comes to Gzela. If you did nothing wrong, you bought something and you cannot remember, any day, you can't remember who you bought it from. Put it down somewhere in the middle and walk away. You did nothing wrong, you can't remember, let them fight it out. You know when the argument of Kibbutz Tarfon is only when you stole the goods. So you did something wrong, and therefore you have to reimburse the victim. And that's what Rabbi Akiva says. You have to pay them all 5. Rabbi Tarfon says, nevertheless, you only pay. You put the money down and walk away. Okay, that's a Shimon Lazar. So obviously the Tanakama argues with this, but the comment of Shimon Lazar says, I mean, no Tanakama argues. What's he arguing? Since if Shimon Lazar says that B'Kiddush, in the case where there's Kedusha, so he did nothing really wrong. You just can't remember who it was. Or the Lakach, when you purchased something, you did really nothing wrong, just can't remember. Like Pligi, there's no argument. Everyone agrees then that you don't have to pay it 5 times. You just put the money down and they're the Moitzim Chavera. They're the ones that are trying to extract from me more money. Let them fight it out. Miklal, so we can infer from that. What about the Tanakama who argues that Shimon Lazar? He holds Pligi. He holds that they argue. They're arguing he did nothing wrong. And that's what Tarfon says. You only put the money down, you walk away. Kiva says, nevertheless, now 5 victims, you have to reimburse them all. But where you did something wrong, for example, you stole the goods, or for example, you had beer with one of the women, then everyone agrees you have to pay it 5 times. Yet our Mishnah says when it comes to Kedushin, when it comes to marriage, it says Kiddush, which means you did nothing wrong. And that's the argument. But when it comes to commercial side, it says Gazel, you stole. Money. So who's the author of our Mishnah? At least the Kiddush v'lokach. Then just like the first case is Kedushin, which he did nothing wrong, and that's the argument. It should have said then v'lokach he bought. He did nothing wrong, and that's the argument. Because if you stole, everyone agrees. You pay 5 times. And even Shimon Lazar, and that's why it says stole, because he says the whole argument is only limited only to a case where you did something wrong, you stole. At least they ball the gaza. Then by Kedushin, by marriage, you said ball. You did something wrong as well. So Shimon Lazar. And you know what it means? Kiddush b'biyah. There's 3 ways of being mekadosh a woman, as we're going to learn Kedushin. So this, when it says here Kiddush, it means through biyah, which is the wrong way, and that's why we have an argument of Tarfon. If you gave him money or shtar, everyone would agree you only have, you don't give a ksuva 5 times. So why does it Tana Kiddush? So why do we need both cases? It mentioned the case of marriage, to tell you how far the Rabbi Akiva goes. Now, what did you do wrong? What did you do wrong if you mekadosh a woman with a beer? I tell you, there's nothing wrong. It's the Rabbanon who say that it's promiscuous. The Rabbi used to give, we'll learn there in Kedushin, Rabbi used to give Menagid, Rabbi used to give Malchus to somebody who gets married, engaged using this third method of beer. So it's only awesome with the Rabbanon because they think it's immoral. So therefore, and Akiva says, nevertheless, he did something wrong, you have to pay 5 ksubas. That's a very big chiddush. He sued the Rabbanon of it, yet kanis. Tana Gezel, he tells you the story of Gzela, where Mahatayri came in innovated, like the Achar Koiched Tarfon. To tell you that Tarfon nevertheless feels that you don't have to reimburse 5 victims 5 times. The Avagav the Yisur, the ice of it, like Kalev, you're not going to penalize you. Mishnah. A woman, Holcha he Ubaila, the Medina Sayam. A woman, now we're talking about changing status quo. So this is case number 1. A woman went with her husband in Ziyam. Mom had a child, which means when she left here, she was not going to marry a Yavam at all. She's a free woman. Then she come back. But my husband died, but my son died afterwards, which means I'm still a free woman because my husband died, I had a child. Because she's not in any way altering the status quo. What about she says she says my husband died and then my son died and my husband, which means I am now a Yevama and I have to marry my brother-in-law. But she's changing the status quo because when she left town here, we were sure that she'd be a free woman. Ain't a mention I believed. She's not believe why? Because we think that maybe she loves her brother-in-law and she wants to marry him. So therefore she came up with this story. On the other hand, she's telling us a story that she's not a free woman because she says that I have to marry my brother-in-law. So what do? We consider what she says and we'll be machmer. The chayletzes v'loy misyabem. And the one that she cannot marry anybody she wants because she says her son predeceased her husband. On the other hand, she cannot marry brother-in-law because when she left town, she would have been, she already had a son, so therefore she had no Yevama business. So therefore we say, can't marry your brother-in-law, but you can't marry anybody else either. Chalitza. What happened? She said, next case. That's case number 1. Case number 2. She says, Nitali Ben, we just had it over before. When I left town, I had the mitzvah of Yavam because I had no children. Then I got a child overseas. But and then she says, but my child predeceased my husband, which means again, I left here having to marry my brother-in-law, and I'm coming back having to marry my brother-in-law. She's not changing the status quo. But if she says, Meis Baili, if she says my husband died, and then my child, which means now I have no mitzvah at all, even though when she left town, she did, ain't an menace. She's not believed because you're changing the status quo. But on the other hand, she's saying that I have no mitzvah of marrying my brother-in-law. So the choshen very considerable words, you cannot marry your brother-in-law. On the other hand, we can't just let you go free because when you left town here, you would have to marry your brother-in-law. So again, chalitza and no yibum. Case number 3. When she left town, she had no brothers-in-law at all, so she was a free woman. Then she comes along and says, I have a brother-in-law that while I was overseas, a brother-in-law was born. I was away for a long time, and then if she says, "Meis Bailey, my husband died," and then my brother-in-law died, or Yevami Meis Bailey, then menace. In both cases, nothing changes. It doesn't make a difference if brother-in-law died pre-deceased your husband or afterwards. The fact is, right now you have no longer a brother-in-law, so she's a free woman. So then we believe her. And makes no difference if we believe her, in fact, because it doesn't make it le'mayla v'le'mayri. It has no impact. You had a brother-in-law for a while, so what? Okay, case number 4. Yeah, she went and her husband and her brother-in-law. So in other words, at the time when she left here, she was bound to a brother-in-law, potential brother-in-law. But Amra, she says, she said, my husband died and then my brother-in-law died. Yevami, or my brother-in-law died, my husband. Either case, she's not believed. Why? Why she's not believed? Because again, she's changing the status quo. We need more credibility. We need more aegis here. We need more evidence that she's a free woman. Because when she left here, she was not able to marry anybody, only a brother-in-law. Now she's telling us the story of brother-in-law died. We need to have more, what do you call it? More evidence here. She's not believed to say, she's not believed to say that my brother-in-law died in order that she can go get married to anybody she wants. She needs more evidence than that. Okay. What about she comes along and she says, she says, what's up? She says, what happens? She says, she says, my sister was married to Shimon. She died, so I cannot marry Shimon. So she basically saying ages in order for her to able to be to marry her brother-in-law. She's not believed to say that my sister died in order that I can marry my brother-in-law. And neither is a man believed to say, my brother died so that he can marry his brother's wife. She doesn't use it because very personally, if you have a specific person in mind, it becomes very personal and we don't believe because maybe there's an ulterior motive here. Nor can a man say, my wife died in order that he can marry her sister. You need evidence. Says the Gemara, interesting question. What happens? Hamazaka get lishta if somebody, let's say, is mazaka get to his wife. No, we know the rule is that if you want me to do something for you, you have to put me as a shliach. But if it's a schus for you, if it actually is a dividend for you, it's a good thing for you, then zachin la'adam shalei b'fanav. And even if you're not aware of it, I can be zeich on your behalf, and there's an argument whether it's a kasav or whether it's zechiyah mitam shlichus. Had you known, definitely there's no question about it, you would have told me to go ahead and do it for you. Okay, so what happened in this case here? So what happens if the husband felt that he was dying, so he wanted her to save his wife from marrying her brother-in-law, but she's not around, so he gave it to a third party. He said, I want you to be zeich on her behalf. I'm doing it for her benefits. I want it to be zeich, and before the get, I want to give her a get so that she's divorced. She doesn't have to. She's not bound to my brother. But before the get reached her, he died. Now, if it's a schus for her, if it's a good thing for her, then she was, as soon as he gave the get to this third party, she already was divorced. Doesn't matter that he died before the arrival of the get. But if it's a bad thing for her, then she's not divorced until she actually gets the get. She receives the get in her hand. So how do we view this when he says the get to her? Is he sparing her? Is he doing her a favor, or actually is he harming her? Says the Gemara. He's blaming it over Nachman and Mazaki. If somebody wants to Mazaka his wife to get the Mokum Yavam, but in a case where he has a brother and his intention is to exempt her from being bound to his brother and going through the whole process. So the question is this considered a favor for her or not? Mao. Keeping the Sanyale, since we know generally that there is some kind of a rivalry or there's a dislike because all the time she's always worried that maybe she fretted that one day she might end up with him, and therefore it's chusula, it's good for her. And therefore she's happy. Given the zimni in the rachbalei, we're talking about we don't ask or even have don't believe her, or because sometimes the sister-in-law actually likes the brother-in-law something you're better than her own husband, then maybe it's a chusula, it's a good thing for her. And adam shalei b'fanav. Sometimes, I went back a line. Sometimes she actually likes her brother-in-law, then by you giving her a get, it's bad for her because then she could never marry her brother-in-law, because then goes back to Easter of the wife of your brother, which is Kaddish. They and if it's bad for them, it doesn't become activated until they actually reach the hand. But you died. This person died before the get arrived to her. What happens? How do we view it? Amalei said to him, to Nina, didn't we learn when she comes along and she changes the status quo? We say we say that what? That we are choishes to what she says. The chayletz is on the one hand, she cannot marry her brother because she's trying to change the status quo. On the other hand, she cannot marry anybody for nearly willy. She has to get a chalitza and not a yibum. So so we see from here clearly that there are some who like the Yevamos, some who don't like they want to marry, because we're saying that maybe she's lying. So sometimes we say maybe she's lying to free herself from her brother-in-law. She wants to get out there. She's changing the story to say that, that I had a son who outlived my husband. So in other words, she's trying to get out of, wiggling away out of marrying a brother-in-law. So we see that there's someone who don't like the brother-in-law. And yet other cases where she's trying to marry a brother-in-law. We don't believe her either. And we say, no, that you need a chalitza and a yibum. That means some are hate and some don't hate. So so we see that it can work both ways, and therefore you need chalitza. So that's why. So you asked the question whether it's good or whether it's no good. We see here that we're not sure. It's a suffix how people behave. Do they like the brother-in-law or they don't like the brother-in-law? So therefore, what do we do is in this case we're going to make her have a chalitza, and there's no yibum. If the husband sends a get through a third party, we don't know whether it was good for her or bad for her. So we'll tell her, look, maybe it was bad for you, and the get is not a get, so you have to marry your brother-in-law. But maybe it was good for you, and therefore you're divorced. You're not allowed to marry your brother-in-law. So therefore, chalitza and no yibum. So Ravina said, what about Hamazaki? What about if somebody, let's say, gives a get to his wife, issues a get to his wife, where there's an argument between the two of them, and he gives it to a third person? Do we say in this case, definitely it's a good thing for her? She wants to get out of her current marriage because she's constantly fighting with her husband. Do we say, because they're arguing with each other, is a chusula? Do we say it's a chus for her? And therefore she's happy to get out of this marriage, and so on and so forth. Or perhaps she'd still be more happily married together and living with another man than being on her own. Even she's willing to put up and tolerate, the arguments that they have, as long as she is still married and she has someone to be with, and so on. So tomorrow I'll bring a number of sayings to say that a woman would like to be married. Question of today, the same thing applies, because they talk about those days, women who needed someone to provide for them. That's why we had parents marrying off their daughters when they were very young. They needed someone to provide for them. So having a stable marriage meant more than just a marriage and everything else. It was a life, a roof over her head, food on the table. So therefore, no matter, they're willing to put up with a lot more than today, where women have their own careers and they can take care of themselves. And therefore, they're going to be putting up with a lot less, as it's self-evident out there. Would these rules still apply today as well? So it's actually an interesting discussion. So Tashma, coming here, the Amar Shlaki said the famous saying in Margadushin, Tav Lemesav Tandu, a woman would rather live together as a pair, Lemesav Armalu, than living on her own. And therefore, she's willing to put up with a lot. And she's willing to endure even Machlekes Ktata, and she'd rather remain married. So therefore, it's a bad thing until she receives the get. She's not divorced because it's a bad thing for her. I think there's a few other sayings about marriage. Let's say that if Rashi says that this guy is short like an ant, maybe means physically, or maybe means that he's unnoticeable wherever he is, that he doesn't stand out at all, and he's a sort of extremely average or below average person. Nevertheless, it gives confidence to this woman that she herself feels, doesn't matter what the husband is, the very fact that she has a husband makes her feel confident, and that she will sit, that kursaya, she'll place her chair, beicharasa, among all these women, who these influential women and the free women, she'll put it there, she feels equal to everybody else, because she feels bolstered by the fact that she has a husband. So therefore, again, what I'm trying to say is that she's willing to put up with a lot, and you cannot say it's a schus for her to be divorced in that situation. Papa says the nafsha gamra, that if a person's husband, let's say, is this is his trade is a really miyasa trade, and you'll never. His job is to clean out wool and remove all the dirt from wool. She will never go around there and brag. You know what my husband does? Your husband's a doctor, but my husband goes and cleans wool. We never say that. Nevertheless, she will have her husband sit next to her on a porch so everybody can see that she's married. Again, you see from here how in the psyche of those days that everybody was so proud just to be married, they were willing to put up with a lot. So therefore, all that we're trying to say is it was a chayv getting divorced, even in a situation where there was a ketata. We had before a whole argument what ketata exactly, or needling down what exactly the definition of ketata is, where she wanted to be divorced, but she said, you divorced me, and she made up a story, and we later proved that she lied, but the very fact that she made up that story tells us that things are not running very well. Rav Ashi says, the kulsa gavri, that even a person who is like cursed, that in his yichus, in the family tree, there's some bad people. Nevertheless, she will not want talpechi or lekida. She will not want what do you call it, beans or legumes or lentils in her pot. In other words, she will not make any demands, even though that his yichus is not great. She's more than happy to marry him and not even ask to buy something cheap that she can cook and so on and so forth. So as long as she's happy that she's married, and that's all that really matters to her. So we see again that it's not the kula, and then the Gemara concludes, and that's why they're willing to put up with so much, and then you can't automatically assume it's a chus for her to get out. Totally we learned. The kulan, we're talking about ketata. We're not talking about we had more ksubas, the things that other reason why perhaps they should get out of the marriage. That's different. We're talking about these just a ketata, an argument. The kulan mezanes, but then the Raisa concludes, but they're not stupid. That these women who are willing to put up a lot to stay married to the person, but then nevertheless, the kulan mezanes, they all cheat behind the husband's backs, because at the end of the day they're not really happy, but they want to stay married, so they're all mezana. The toilet is b'balein, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm pregnant. It's my husband's child." We had a few times in Gemara before with our mother said it's impossible they could have had children in this case, and I can promise you, it's somebody else's children. But nevertheless, the Gemara is trying to say over here is that everybody that in a case of ketata, they're willing to put up a lot. We can't automatically assume because there's a ketata they'd rather get divorced, because they're still very happy to have a home and the stability in their lives, even though they themselves might cheat and everything else, but they have stability in their lives. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow with the Shem. So if any